Turn back to the economy may have added jobs for 21 straight months, but has it created enough jobs to revive a still sluggish economy? Well, joining us now are two former CEOs who are part of the Nonpartisan Job Creators Alliance, which favors low corporate tax rates, limited regulation, and availability of credit so businesses can grow and thrive, and I suppose in turn hire people. Well, John Allison is the former CEO of BB&T Bank, now a professor at Wake Forest University Business School. We also have Tom Stemberg. He's the former CEO of Staples, now a managing general partner at Highland Capital Partners. Great to have you both joining us, particularly on a day where there's a lot of debate about exactly what the employment rate meant this morning. We saw a lot of people jumping out of leaving the labor force. What was your takeaway?
My take is that this point in our economic recovery is a disappointing number. And it's not a bad number, but I went through the 80s recession, the early 90s recession. In both cases, we were creating jobs at a much more rapid pace. And I believe it's because of more government interference in market corrections. We need to let the market correct. We need to let housing find a bottom so we can start creating construction jobs. And I think the regulatory burden is unprecedented in my 40-year career, and it's making businesses less willing to make the investments to create jobs. So it's not a bad number, but it's a disappointing number at this point in the cycle. We ought to be creating more jobs.
But you're also sort of implying that if the government's doing too much, that there could be some more pain before we find a bottom, whether it's in housing or anything else. Is that fair?
It's fair. And the housing market, I've been in the residential real estate lending business for a long time. BB&T fortunately didn't have any problems in the crisis because we didn't do any of the dumb stuff, but we are a big residential lender. They will not let the market find a bottom in house pricing. So if you're a typical consumer who wants to pay $150,000 for a house when it might be $125,000 next month, they've kept the foreclosure process from working. It'd be a lot better if they just let us find a bottom, and then people would start buying again.
We're going to get more into detail. I know you mentioned Dodd-Frank as being something that should go away, but of course you're very close to the banking industry. Tom, do you have a very different perspective on this, having come from
as we look at
Main Street?
We look at the economy. If you add structural unemployment, 1 in 6 Americans is unemployed, and that's just simply unacceptable. And one of the big reasons why is governments trying to create jobs. Now, they create some jobs. They pass a regulation at Dodd-Frank that every corporation's got to figure out what the ratio of the CEO pay is to the average employee around the world. And I'm sure we'll hire a bunch of clerks to figure that out, but those aren't productive jobs that'll help our balance of payments. With the Consumer Regulatory, Consumer Finance Agency, the Elizabeth Warren Agency, they're going to add $300 million worth of payroll and jobs to do a job that, assume they'll figure out what they're going to do once they get there, but those jobs aren't going to add much to American productivity. In fact, the regulations that are put on companies are forcing them to spend money on unproductive things as opposed to doing their basic job, which is to sell goods and services and to create a thriving economy.
But what about the fact that profitability is so good still? We talked about a recovery. It's really a recovery in profits. We just went through earnings season now. So why aren't companies hiring?
I think businesses are very concerned about public policy, too. They're worried about our deficits. They don't see a solution. They're concerned about rising taxes, and they're also concerned about things like Europe. But I think when you combine that with a very heavy regulatory burden, it just makes people more cautious. And this is interesting. Jobs are created by innovations, by creativity. And human minds can only do a certain number of things. I look at the people running BB&T today. My replacement CEO is spending radically more time on regulations than I had to spend, which means he has less time and talent to do productive, creative, innovative things that actually create jobs. And you take that across our whole economy. We're putting balls and chains on our best minds.
So, Tom, if creating jobs is not the solution, and of course, government right now accounts for 24% of GDP. It's a post-World War II high. If creating jobs is not government's role, what can the government do to help businesses create jobs?
Get the heck out of the way. It's that simple. There's some abuses you have to protect against. But basically, I invest in mainstream kind of retail businesses that sell sporting goods or yoga wear and things like that. We don't need government regulations to protect the consumer from what we're doing. And if the government got out of the way, I think we'd all be better off and businesses would thrive.
Now, give us examples of how government's getting in the way, not of the banks, but just simple Main Street businesses like
I'll give you several examples. Let's take Obamacare as an example. If you're any kind of employer with a reasonable sized facility, you have to create a lactation chamber in your office. So people, now I'm a big believer, my wife breastfed, I'm a big believer in that. But I don't think we need lactation chambers right here in this building necessarily on every floor.
And that's mandated by law.
That's mandated by Obamacare. Obamacare further says that the cost you can charge for a older senior citizen can be no more than 3 times the cost for a young person. Well, the fact of the matter is that my health care costs are going to be a lot higher than yours, Adam, and we're basically saying you're going to subsidize my health care costs. I don't think that makes any sense. And again, we create all these problems and burdens. Dodd-Frank, you now have to assess. I'm a chairman of 3 public comp committees. One of the we have to assess the risk factors that our compensation policies create for the enterprise as well as for the financial system as a whole. Now, our retailers, selling yoga wear aren't going to create a lot of risk to the global economy. Yet we do this big analysis of what happens. And in one particular company, they went down, they didn't just deal with CEO bonuses and stock options, they went all the way down to the clerk on the sales floor. And I said to the folks, Jack, I don't think this is what the SEC had in mind. We'll send it in. I'm sure they'll be very happy, but this is ridiculous. Thinking that that's the last we'd hear from it. You know what came back? A 4-page letter from the SEC asking for more information.
Let me bring up a point, because that's a great story, but I do want to bring up a point. This was made by John Herman when he was just on. He was talking about 2 million construction jobs being lost at the beginning of the recession when the downturn first started, and those 2 million construction workers still are unemployed, which speaks to a structural employment issue. So if we don't allow government to sort of stimulate hiring in that sector and allow it to solve itself, doesn't it take many more years to get back to full employment?
Well, Lisa, think of it this way. All right, are we better off having a business, whether it's a bank building a branch, or what City Sports building a store, or Jay McLaughlin building a store? Are we better off having that happen and create construction jobs? Are we better off having them pave the roads when they don't need it, backing up traffic for miles and miles and miles with so-called stimulus money? In Massachusetts, they took the stimulus money and built these huge sound barriers along Route 128. In places where nobody lived, so the woods didn't get the noise.
I don't disagree with you, but what if there are no more construction jobs in that? Or what if there are only another 1 million construction jobs? The other 1 million construction workers need to get re-educated.
Here's the interesting thing. We've got to create the environment where businesses can innovate. Businesses create jobs through innovation. Steve Jobs created, tremendous number of jobs if you look at all the connected jobs. The regulatory environment keeps businesses from innovating and replacing those construction jobs, which, by the way, we don't need, right? We built too many houses. We need for those people to learn to do something else. But the way that works is businesses create something else to do. They've got it backwards. They think demand drives supply. It's actually supply. Who would have thought what Bill Gates did? And it's created millions and millions of jobs. It created jobs. So you've got to create, it's actually the supply that drives the demand. It's like houses don't create jobs. Jobs create houses. It's a very backwards mindset of what actually happens in business.
All right, gentlemen, we have to end it there. It was a great, though, and lively debate. Very enlightening. Great to have you both. That was John Allison and Tom Stemberg, of the Jobs Creators Alliance, bringing on a healthy debate on this Friday Jobs Day.